animation, turning that art literally making the art move can definitely take a lot more time. So the actual steps to animation, it's kind of like how art does it. First you need the basic skeleton, or like, just crossing the face to tell what the face is, and the actual structure of the body. You can see some kind of skeleton or rough sketch or template, whatever people would call it. After that, you generally have the rough sketches or like the rough line art for the actual character. So then after you clean up that line art to put the cleaner line art on, then you can start to add the coloring, and it might be useful to have a background. But I didn't add any backgrounds to these because, again, they're practice. After that, generally you'll want to pick a lighting area where the light or multiple lights are being shown, so that you can shade and light it in the correct areas. Afterwards, well, actually not afterwards, but from there you can add some effects if you'd like, and anything else that might make the animation pop or whatever. So here's just a small animation that I've done. It took me about an hour and 30 minutes to do. Again, it's not very complicated. It only has the skeleton and the rough sketch, but it only took a short amount of time, so. So yeah, they were kind of having a little fight together in context of what the characters are doing. And depending on the type of animation, there's generally different types of animation. Like, for example, there can be line art, there can be lineless animation, and especially what's important is to consider if the animation is going to be quick or if it's going to be smooth. And depending on the type, if you want it to be quick, you'll have to add very few frames but make it look smooth altogether, like how back here, the ball had only a few frames because it was going quickly.
How many frames in the whole sequence?
In the whole sequence, there is only 28 frames. There isn't too much to it.
And you do it individually.
So then for smooth animation, obviously you want to draw a lot of frames to make it look really smooth, like say dragging lighting or something else like that. And then for animation like this, it doesn't take a lot of coding to do. It's just having to switch between frames, perhaps making a few things react with each other, but not very much.
So are you coding on this and have a package that when he does that?
So the site that I use for this is called Scratch, and it's unlike something where it's like Python, in which it has all the lines of coding. It's more for beginner animators, and it's especially from I think it was grades 2 to high school, where you just use simple blocks to put them together. So it isn't very complicated, but it definitely does need some understanding.
Did you draw these on like a draw pad?
Yeah, I do have a draw pad, but I never hit.
Okay.
And then this one is more focused on actual coding, as you can see with all the code there. So that is more focused on coding, and this took me about a week to do.
What do the various code blocks represent?
So the various code blocks represent, so the ones in the purple are with how it looks. For example, this is one of the costumes. Well, actually, I should just go here. So this is one of the costumes. So these are one of the costumes, i.e. one of the small faces that's shown. But if I want it to be hidden, then I can press the show, then the hidden, and then the show. So the purple ones are generally for the actual how it looks. The blues is how it actually moves. So line 162 line -10, for example, it'll glide down that way. And then there's control, like repeating of how much you need to wait, forever. Events. This is how they react to each other. So when one of these is broadcasted, it'll affect it by giving it a command to do. Sensing is when it's similar to reacting, but it's more of
Is that a difference between like gold and color?
yeah, there is a difference between both of them.
Yeah.
So the sensing is actually telling like when a costume switches to a different one, and then therefore reacting a bit to it. So say this arm needs to go down the head, it'll be like when head moves down in 10 spaces, arm will move up 10 spaces or something like that. Operators, I don't know too much about how that works yet, but I am still studying it. Neither variables or blocks, but for the most part I understand what these are, which are the most important ones. So obviously it takes a lot more coding to do things like this, which have much more movement, reaction to them, and you get it on timing and have them in beat with the music that is going to be shown and other things like that. So
What are the different
vertical line.
bars or?
Yeah,
What?
so it's kind of, it's something that helps with artists when they need to tell where the line is. It's kind of like having a line.
The code boxes.
Oh.
There's like a block here. What's?
Yeah, these are individual messages. So as I was saying with receiving something, so when I broadcast this, it'll have this. And therefore it'll go with that.
So the broadcast is a trigger that kicks off?
Yeah, it's a trigger that works. It affects the other blocks.
Is that a different loop?
It's not infinite loop, but there were two parts that I separated it in to make them have, yeah, this is the second part. So after this is done, it'll get finished and then it'll be fine. And then, well, then it'll be done, so nothing much.
How many frames is that?
Because it isn't an animation like the other one that I had shown, it only has to use like one costume for every time that it repeats. So like head 1, head 2, head 3, head 4. Like I only need to draw one separate one for each of them. And then I'll switch the costumes so it doesn't take as much frames as the other one. But then unlike so the head, yes, I need only one costume, but then for the faces that I was showing, how they were like opening, closing their mouths, giving expressions, those need a few frames, but other than that, it's not too hard. So, yeah.
So you said this one took you about a week. How many hours a day does that make that?
Too many.
Well, it depends.
I mean, you up till 2 o'clock in the morning?
No.
Oh, tell the truth, Alegria.
12 hours a night. Generally takes about, from when I wake up into the morning to when I go to bed at night, which is from about 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. So, of course, I take breaks here and then. So I'd say about 6 hours every day, but yeah, a lot of time takes.
Do you see yourself pursuing this?
I do see myself pursuing it. I definitely want to, but in order for me to try and pursue it, I want to at first get good. Well, I want to first be able to understand how the simple block coding works with the kids animation site, kids coding site, and then first I want to do the 2D animation, and then I'll furthermore try to go to Python and 3D. So, like,
So the underlying thing here is a Python.
yeah.
But are they classes? Or do you learn on your own?
I'm learning on my own.
Wow.
Except we do have this book that teaches all about coding, the basics of coding. I'm reading that, so it is helping, but I'm generally learning this all on my own.
But when you get to where you're doing the Python part,
Yeah.
there's a ton of stuff out there. If you just Google Python and whatever you're looking for, you'll find somebody explaining it.
What
Yeah.
really
Might be
is?
able to- might be able to teach me.
What got you interested in
So I had always kind of been, Disney, it's been around for forever. I had always kind of admired ever since I was young. So I've always wanted to kind of do a little artistry and creativity to put in my work. So I definitely wanted to. Wait, what was I saying? Oh yeah. Sorry. So obviously, as I was saying, Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks with all of their type of things, I had just gotten really invested in it. But the thing that actually introduced me to kind of coding was back in New York. I was for my public school. I was tasked with doing this coding class, so that's how I got into Scratch, and then started to further move on from there, and then do it on my own.
New York was one of your parents' previous deployments?
I don't know.
Yes, he was a teacher there at West Point for a couple of years.
Okay.
So,
Chemistry.
Now, you have an assistant here or supervisor?
She's trying to encourage her to show you some other images that she showed us
I
yesterday.
didn't bring any other images. I didn't download them.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't bring any more. But she does help me with seeing if all the animation looks right. If, like for example, I had drawn this. I was letting her peer pressure. Well, not peer pressure.
Peer evaluate?
Peer evaluate, like give a critique on it. So she helped me with kind of critiquing things and seeing if it's correct, giving me advice, and blah blah blah.
We do that too all the time. Anytime we're trying to do something important, we get a bunch of other people to look it over and do peer review and tell us.
Yeah, peer pressure.
Yeah.
What's the name of that character?
He is an original creation of mine, and his name is Quinn.
Quinn?
So yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks for showing us that. That was
You're
fun.
welcome.